If you have your career at heart, you must listen to today's show. A career, most of us have learned, is anything but a straight line. It is often a journey where you know where you start, but you don't know what your next destination, let alone the final one, will be. In this journey, you will meet people, situations, and obstacles, and how you handle them will determine whether or not you will succeed. Yet, thinking that knowing how to handle external situations is the only skill you need to succeed would be a mistake. Because as our guest of today teaches us in his book, The Compass and the Radar, knowing yourself first is a prerequisite of a successful career. Paolo Gallo is an executive coach, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and university professor. In his career, he has worked as Chief Human Resources Officer at the World Economic Forum in Geneva, Chief Learning Officer at the World Bank in Washington, D.C., and in various leadership roles in HR with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the International Finance Corporation, and Citigroup. I'm very excited about today's conversation because in my desire to bring value to my community, I feel that Paolo's experience and beautiful storytelling can help many people out there navigate the challenging times we are experiencing and have not just a career, but actually a meaningful one. Paolo, it's a pleasure to have you on Lax and Tech.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure. I'm quite excited to have a conversation with you, Carlo.
Paolo, while reading your book, I had several holy shit moments in which I said to myself, oh, if I only knew this at the beginning of my career, or if I only said that in a certain situation, or if I only avoided that trap. I mean, your book is really filled with gold nuggets that everyone, regardless of their position, can benefit from to try and avoid mistakes and have a successful career. So before we delve into the book, would you like to share with our listeners your journey to help them put into perspective what we will talk about later?
Well, first of all, thank you again. My journey is actually pretty normal. I just did what I loved pretty much all my life. I followed my passions, and I was very lucky also to end up and marry the person I love, adopting a little girl that she's my hero. So I like to think that my life has been a journey of a quest of finding meaning and love in whatever I do, and which is translated also in my activities. So it's a kind of a simple journey if you think about it.
How many countries have you worked and lived in?
In 86 different countries in my life, and I fell in love with almost all of them.
Wow. Why did you title your book The Compass and the Radar?
Yeah, I mean, Carlo, this is a very good question because, you mentioned that I've been head of HR for different organizations in different countries, no? So some time ago, I was reflecting because I saw thousands of candidates and people in organizations from so many different countries, and from junior secretaries to Nobel Prizes and prime ministers, CEOs, and all the rest. No? So I was reflecting on a very simple question: what does it mean having a successful career? Yeah. And what do we mean by success? These are the two questions that drove my research, my desire to go deeper on the topic. No, and then I came up with this, in my view, two symbols represented by the title, the radar, the compass, and the radar. So the radar is because, in my view, you need to have an overview of what's happening around you, over and above the job description and the sector of the role that you perform in whatever organization. So fundamentally, the radar, the capacity to see what's going on around you. And the compass is very simple. It's just the capacity to reflect on a very simple question, which is, what do you stand for? What you stand for? What are the things that you believe? What are your values? What are the things that drives you, motivates you? What are the things that you're available to fight for? Which is much deeper than trying to get a promotion and maybe a salary increase. So to me, the capacity to use the instrument are essential, because if you only have let's say the radar, you probably have a good understanding of the world, but you have no direction. If you only have a direction, but you don't know where you're going, well, good luck to you, because you're not going to go anywhere. You need to have both. And so to me, what I found remarkable in successful individuals is the capacity to use and have both. And so my attempt to write this book was, in a way, the attempt to give this experience to people And I was very surprised that the book ended up being available in 8 languages. It sold 50,000 copies, and it's coming now in paperback edition as well in UK and in US. So this gives me a sense that was relevant for individuals, regardless of the sector, nationality, and gender.
Paolo, passion and talent are not the same, and you make this distinction very clear in the book. In my career, I've seen countless people accumulate frustration trying to make their passion their job, and I've said many times that passion is often misunderstood and highly overrated. I mean, one has to do what he has to do and what's best at any given time, rather than what they like. So what shall we do? Follow our passion or our talent?
Well, I think ideally it would be the same, but it's not necessarily the same. Let me give an example in which I give many times, and hopefully helpful to understand. I'm very passionate about tennis. I love tennis. I think it's a beautiful sport. I think that Federer is a genius. And I personally believe it's a fantastic sport to play and to watch. Point is, I have this huge amount of passion since I was a teenager, but I have zero talent. And God has unfortunately forgot about me when I was distributing talent on tennis. I was probably queuing in front of Federer. Federer got everything and ended up with crumbles. And joking aside, it remained a passion in my life. I still play. But I have to pay people to play with me, which I usually call tennis teacher. And so tennis teacher usually spend time with me. And I still cultivate my passion. It gives me a lot of joy playing, but quite frankly, zero talent. Talent is actually is a different story, which is not only what you're passionate, but what people recognize that you're particularly good at. And so I don't want to give a commercial sense of it, but when the market is saying, "Hey, listen, I'm prepared to pay for you to perform this activity." But the problem at times is that people confuse, let's say, talent with "this is my job." In reality, talent becomes a strength when you cultivate it. And I'm going to give another tennis analogy. When Flavia Pennetta won the US Open about 10 years ago, against, incidentally, in a final against another Italian player, Roberta Vinci, this journalist from Italy went on the court as soon as she shoot the last ball and she won the game. And she said, "Oh, Flavia, what a stroke of luck, the last point." And Flavia, if I'm allowed to say only one bad word in this podcast, he said, "Stroke of luck, fuck. I've been working 25 years on this shot." No? And this is, to me, is a beautiful phrase that say, listen, I've been working so hard for 2.5 decades to make sure that I can shoot that ball in the final. And this is, to me, is actually the beautiful visualization of what does it mean moving from passion. She was probably passionate about tennis. She realized it was her talent, and she worked incredibly hard to translate this talent into a strength that made her a champion. Yeah. So the process is quite interesting. We all have passions. Some of them remain passion in terms of hobbies, like my tennis. Some of them became passion because actually people start to enjoy and like it. So ask feedback. So before writing my book, I wrote many articles, and people say, "Oh, I love your article. When can you get the next one? Oh, I love this." And so all of a sudden you start listening. People say, "Oh my God, it's kind of nice." It's like cooking, a restaurant and whatever it is. You listen people feedback, Yeah. And then once you realize that actually this direction gives you joy and people have joy in using this, then you have to sweat. Then you have to work incredibly hard, and so you will be able to shoot that shot in the last game of your life.
Yeah, and I love how in the book you say that talent is necessary, but not enough. I actually think that talent can be even misleading for some people. For example, I have trained and managed thousands of salespeople in my life, and I have noticed that the most talented ones, those with the raw talent, were not necessarily the ones who kept progressing in their career. That's maybe because everything was so easy at the beginning for them that they didn't develop a habit to work hard and keep learning and fine-tuning their skills.
But that's exactly my point, Carlo, which is I used to be a journalist, for music. I wrote, and I remember once I interviewed Eric Clapton. Wow. And it was a bunch of journalists. They came to Milan for a concert and were there. And I remember there was a few years between records, and one journalist said, "Oh, what have you done between the last record and this one?" And Eric Clapton said, "Oh, I've been playing guitar and exercising with my guitar." And the journalist said, "But come on, you're the best guitar player in the world." And then he said, "That's why I'm the best guitar player in the world." No? And so, and if you look at right now, there is this beautiful series on Netflix about The Last Dance, about the Chicago Bulls. You see the discipline, the grit of Michael Jordan. And when people think, "Oh my God, he was so talented as a basketball player," they forgot the fact that the guy has put 10 hours per day, going to the gym, exercising, working incredibly hard, strengthening some of the muscle that perhaps were not strong enough for playing at their level in the NBA. And here you see how probably the most talented basketball player that ever existed has put tons and tons of hours to improve. And so I'm encouraging people, starting from my own daughter, if you find the gift, if you find the treasure inside you, which is a story that I share in my book, well, this little treasure has to be cultivated with sweat, with exercise, with discipline. Otherwise, it just you will remain a kind of a nice amateur in doing whatever you're doing.
Indeed. Let's move to another important subject of your book, corporate culture. You write that failing to understand an organization's culture is probably one of the biggest mistakes one can make. Can you help us understand what makes a company's culture, and what shall people do to try and understand it beyond a mission statement published on our website?
Well, that's actually is a misleading element, because people, you look at the mission statement, you look at the video, you look at the corporate webpage, and then you kind of, I figured it out. And usually they only have innovation, integrity, this kind of stuff. Okay.
Yeah. You mentioned Enron in your book.
Enron was like an innovation within integrity. So to me, it's just a beautiful story to say this is a bunch of crooks that end up in jail, but until 1 minute before they were claiming something completely different. It's like having the Ku Klux Klan claiming that diversity is important. They're not really credible. Right?
Exactly.
So here, you need to do a bit of homework before going there, because the corporate culture is fundamentally the operating model of the forma mentis, the glue that held organizations together. I've been head of human resources for Citibank, for World Bank, World Economic Forum, and BRD. So technically, it was the same job, but in reality, it was a completely different game based on the corporate culture. The World Bank is a very, let's say, to a certain extent bureaucratic, but also very strict in terms of culture, in terms of rules. And World Economic Forum is a different game, because it is fundamentally in the hands of the founder who has shaped this organization. So it's a very different organization compared to others. So the understanding is essential. So the question is, how do you actually understand the organization? And in my book, I provide 5 or 6, hopefully, some hints to help. And the one that I quote quite frequently is, look at the senior management in this organization. Okay, try to ask a very simple question: how did they go there? How comes that these guys are in charge of this organization? Let's say organization number 1, and I'm not putting any names. You have the father, you have people in the families, you have the nephew, the nieces, the girlfriend, and the cousins. So you kind of understand this organization is a family-owned run business. Nepotism is the rule of the game. Or you see another organization in which, let's say, I'm quoting a wonderful example, let's say CERN, which is run by Fabiola Giannotti. There are 12,000 scientists, physics, most of them. And when you see the profile of the people at the top management, you realize that these people are the most brilliant mind in this specific discipline. And so you get a sense that in order to be competent, in order to be there, you need to be competent in your role. Or maybe there is an organization, one quote any name, in which you don't even know who are the guys on top. You don't know the profiles. And so you understand there is a very opaque organization where probably meritocracy is not particularly welcome. So you really have to, or let's say now in Switzerland, I won't quote the name of the organization, but there's an organization with 48 managers, managing directors, of which 47 of them are male. And so when you look at the web page in which they say we believe in diversity, well, no, they don't. They claim that they do, but they don't give a shit, because 47 people out of 48 are men, and there's only one woman that is kind of struggling to be in that position. So here I'm inviting people to say, well, before you commit to organization, make sure that you do your homework by understanding the real culture, which is not the one that people claim on an elegant web page, but the one you observe by doing some homework. And so do that, because if you're not aligned with the values of this organization, it's not going to be an easy game for you.
This actually reminds me of something I experienced many years ago when I joined a company, and the culture of this company was totally shaped by the CEO. To give you an example, I remember that the CEO would visit the office I used to work in every 3 or 4 weeks. And every time his personal assistant would come to the office 2 or 3 hours before him, unlock his personal toilet, and there were only 2 toilets in the office, one for everybody else, for everyday use, and the other one reserved for the CEO. And then she would refresh his personal office, make sure that his favorite candies were displayed on his desk, and that was the culture of the place. But the problem is that I only discovered that when I joined the company. Now, I appreciate that this was before mobile internet was introduced, so things have certainly changed. But what I'd like to ask you, Paolo, is what can people practically do to understand what's going on in terms of culture before they join the wrong company, a company where their values don't fit in, or vice versa?
Well, here, I think there are many opportunities to do so. I mean, one thing I suggest is go on LinkedIn and contact people that work over there. And to say, dear Carl, and you work for Procter & Gamble, can I pick up your brain for 10 minutes to have some advice? No, so it's like the TripAdvisor organization. No, like before you go to a restaurant. I mean, last week I went to Verbier, and what did I do? I went on TripAdvisor and I started looking the restaurants and the place where to go. So I kind of trusted, the 100 plus review a given restaurant, and indeed it was a good experience. So talk to people that had this experience before. Go on Glassdoor, look at the videos. I mean, now there are many videos on YouTube or whatever about the CEOs speaking in whatever organization, etc., etc. Look at the financial results. Look at the composition of senior management team, and to see, okay, do you see diversity there, or everybody in the same kind of culture? No. So when you look at this kind of, when you do this homework, I think you start to have quite a lot of experience. Now, something else that I'm encouraging doing, but I know it's not always possible, try to go to the reception of this company. Of course, if you live in Italy and you're applying for a job in Japan, it's difficult. But if you have an interview for one organization, just walk around, just go to the lobby, see how people behave, see how people are dressed, see how the language occurs. Look at the review of this company on newspapers or whatever. And I think you're going to have quite a huge amount of experience and information that you can then transform in questions when you go for interviews. Because interviews I said this in my book, it sounds surprising. The objective of an interview is not to get a job.
No, I agree.
Get to interview to understand the job. It's different, because you shouldn't approach an interview as if you are in a romantic date, try to seduce the person in front of you. You should go to an interview with the understanding that you're doing the due diligence to find out if it's worth spending 50 to 60 hours per day for the next few years for this kind of organization. Because if you don't do this, you may end up using the date analogy with a beautiful marriage and with a fantastic party. And then the day after, when the wedding is over and the marriage starts, you realize you married the wrong person, and then it's a bit of trouble. Luckily, this is not my case, because I married a wonderful woman and we've been together for 23 years. So it's not based on my experience, but you know the analogy.
Yeah, I do. I'm also happily married. With culture, you write in the book, goes also language. And you have a great story of when you moved from Citigroup, if I remember well, to the World Bank in Washington, D.C., and the fact that you had to adapt to a completely different language. Would you like to share the story?
Well, now this is if you think about language is a key element of the culture of a person, of an organization, no? And think about, for example, the language that Donald Trump is currently using, no? Is a belligerent language. We have to dominate the protesters. We have to fight the Chinese. And is using a very violent language that constantly let's say, raise the issue of we are at war against somebody. Okay, but look at the language used by the Prime Minister of New Zealand or Angela Merkel. Is a language of conciliation, is a language of building bridges, is a language of connectivity and inclusion. So the language is absolutely crucial. Now, the example that I quote in my book, Citibank is a great organization. I was honored to work over there, but ended up with a manager that was really, let's say, he was using the F word 75 times per minute. And I thought it was a caricature because the guy was from Texas with cowboy hats and boots and a cigar, and he was cursing like it was an amazing fun guy to work with, but he was pretty, let's say, inappropriate all the time on so many jokes. And so I had this boss for 4 years. So I went to the World Bank thinking, well, that's my leadership style. And then I realized that it was in a completely different environment, extremely diplomatic, in which even mentioning the word F would get you out of the door within a minute. So I realized literally within 3 hours that the modality that we used in organization was totally inappropriate, if actually more than inappropriate in other one. So you have to adapt. But again, the adaptation, it has to be based on the values. Do you feel comfortable in an organization that is using a certain language rather than others? And so you have to surely adapt, but also to understand if this adaptation is in line with your being, with your values, with your operating model, because if it's not, you have to pretend for many years.
Let's talk about the job interview now. Like you, I've always believed that one should approach it with a buyer mentality rather than a seller mentality, which means that you should leverage the opportunity to understand if you are the right fit for the job and if the job is suitable to you. In the book, you share tons of tips and tricks to succeed at a job interview, both from a candidate and a recruiter point of view. Would you like to share some?
Again, I interviewed more than 9,000 people in my life, and therefore I was very pleased because to me it was a beautiful opportunity to know so many people. And again, first of all, I'm gonna give you a practical example. Usually people come with a script. They put the best tie, the best dress. They shaved well. They want to give their best. They put a big smile. And they have a script because they want to demonstrate how wonderful they are, and therefore they merit the job. They deserve the job. Okay, and so they come almost like an actor, able to immediately start the show that has been rehearsed many times. And I never let them do this because fundamentally I would play their games. So I want them to play my games, and so I always start with 2 questions, and both of them are destabilized. And the first question was, which question do you have for me? And most of the people, they didn't have a question prepared because they have a script. And so that was destabilizing. Or another one, I used to say, okay, Carlo, what is the most important thing that you learned in the last 6 months? And to me, usually it was at least 30, if not 60 seconds of silence. And out of people, they couldn't figure it out anything. So end up inventing something completely stupid. And to me, it was an indication that the person is not a learner. Yeah. So what does it mean if you're not a learner? That you maybe can be qualified to do a job, but as soon as the job has changed, the parameters are different, the new market, etc., your incapacity of learning will make you inadequate to learn. And so these people, I usually get them out of the door within 20 minutes. But if people reflected to say, listen, I've learned about my mistakes, I've read this book, and so I was listening the process of learning that went into their head, even in domain not necessarily related to their profession. These people gave me the confidence they would have been adapted or new learning, and therefore they were in a good spot to get a job.
You wrote, finding a job is a full-time job. So what shall people do to find a job in 2020?
Now, here is an important question because finding a job is a job. Okay, people think it's easy, but it's not, and implies strategy. And in my book, chapters 2 and 3, I tend to give some practical suggestions. Again, first of all, you do some homework. You try to find out. So you don't apply a job because there is a job available at that moment. You apply for a role for a job in organization because you want to go there. Okay, that's different. Okay, is the difference between I want to get married, or I want to get married with the person I love. That's two different things. Okay. Second is once you say, okay, I'm working, let's say in London or Milan or Geneva, which are the companies, assuming that you want to stay in this place, that you're particularly interested in working. And in Geneva, you have, for example, the United Nations, but you also have Philips Morris, let's say a lot of pharma companies, you have Procter & Gamble, you have the World Economic Forum. So you start strategizing to say, I believe, given the culture of this organization, given my own values, that I would fit in this organization. And so you start to say, okay, I'm targeting company A, B, and C, but D, E, and F, not really. So then you start to say, okay, who are the people that work in there? I can get some insights, some ideas, some connections, some affiliation. And so you start to get into this organization, because people think you get a job because you apply. No, you don't. You get a job because somebody has recommended you. When I say recommended, I don't mean in a like Italian raccomandazione. I mean like somebody that knows of you and they think, I think Carlo is a great guy.
Yes.
I think today, for example, I got an email from somebody to say, oh, your name has been mentioned by, would you be interested in this job? The answer is no, because I'm not interested to work for another company. But it's nice to hear that some people still your marketing officer. So you need to have this one. And here I want to reflect perhaps in a concept that is important, because the interview, the curriculum are very important. But there is something that to me is the fundamental need to be able to look for a job and to find one. And I keep on saying to people that we all have three assets, three wealth, three things that we need to develop, three capital that we have to develop. The knowledge capital, so what we know and how the know translate in being able to do it. The second one is our relationship capital. So who do we know?
Yeah.
The third one is our reputational capital. Okay. So knowing people and our reputation. So you constantly have to develop these three capitals, three assets, three wealth that we have. No. So knowing means keep on learning and being able to translate this learning into a practical effect. So if I memorize all the recipes of the Italian cuisine, but I cannot even do a pasta, well, then my learning is pretty dry. So I need to demonstrate that I can cook, not only that I can. So, are you able to cook? Are you able to do something? The second one is the relationship capital, which is to me is based on trust. Relationship is about what you do with other people for other people. It's not what they can do for you. So this is a giving economy that you're referring to. Mm-hmm. And the third one is your reputation. What is your reputation in doing what you're doing? And it's much more than compliance. It's the way you do stuff, the way you operate with your integrity, with your compass, based in my book. No? So when you develop constantly in your life these three capitals, the relationship, the knowledge, and the reputation, I think it's relatively easier for a person to look for a job, because you have already invested quite a lot on this. If you have not invested in this, or you invested only in one, let's say you're unbelievably good in doing something, but nobody knows you and your reputation is not existent, then it's difficult. It's like you have overdeveloped certain muscles in your body, but underdeveloped others. So therefore, it's more difficult to run. Okay, so I'm encouraging people to say, before you think about job interviews, questions, etc., take stock of how you develop these three capitals, three assets in your professional life. Because if you have done this for many years, it's probably easier for you to look for a job. But if you haven't done anything, it's going to be a bit of a difficult journey.
And speaking of reputation, we all know how difficult it is to build a good one and how easy to destroy it. In the book, you stress on the importance of being extremely careful of what we post online, the importance of managing our social networks and, in general, our digital footprint in a way that doesn't backfire us.
No, absolutely, because people don't ask anymore three names to take references. Now the organization they stop doing this because even the worst person can give three names of people. They say great things about this individual. Now they Google you and to see how you behaved, and so they go on. There's actually an app that was developed recently. It was quite a lot of fun, but they had to took it down because they were breaking a lot of privacy laws, in which there was an app in which they were getting all the information that people left on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Yeah.
And some dating, what do you call the dating things? I mean, some dating platforms.
Yeah, those dating apps.
In there, right? Again, I've been married 22 years, so I'm not on this. I'm not really sure.
It's research knowledge.
Exactly. So just to avoid problem with my wife, no. But here, so this actually app was in my view, a very interesting concept to say, okay, is your professional side consistent with the personal side? And so I remember, and I quote this example in my book. Some time ago, I was in London. We ended up making an offer to a candidate that was brilliant on so many respects. And then out of curiosity, one day I went on his Facebook page and the guy was dressed like a Nazi. And he organized a birthday party which was dressed like a Nazi in a concentration camp. And he did this party for 6 consecutive years as a Nazi. But to me, it was just, I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe somebody was so racist, so stupid, and so inappropriate, and so just ignorant, and all the rest. So I called this guy, said, I'm withdrawing the offer. And the guy wanted to sue me for discrimination. I said, fine, let's go to a tribunal and let's enjoy your pictures dressed like Adolf Hitler, whipping people dressed like in the concentration camp. I never heard from him ever again. Luckily, the guy disappeared. But here is a story that say, be cautious in what you put in there. Yeah. Be cautious of some pictures of you getting drunk or saying something stupid and inappropriate, because it's going to stay there. It's going to stay there. And so somebody's going to pick up something you've done 15 years earlier to say, look at this, you were engaged, I don't know, in a racist comment, and right now it's not the right moment to do so. So I'm saying people, don't be obsessed, but be cautious and ask yourself a question. If in 10 years' time your kid will look at this picture or this phrase, would you feel comfortable? If the answer is yes, no problem. If the answer is no, think twice, because that is going to hunt you in a job search.
Yeah, that is going to hunt you. I agree. Now, there's another section in your book in which you compare the population making an organization with a zoo. And in this zoo, we will find the most diverse types of animals, from parrots to dogs, to lambs, bears, from peacocks to foxes and snakes, to owls, elephants and lions. How do we survive in this jungle?
But here is a very simple concept, because the idea of let's say, defining people based on certain characteristics is not something I invented. It goes from the Greek tragedy. And so I haven't invented anything new. I simply wanted to translate in something that is understandable to people. And I wrote this chapter for my daughter, because by putting animals, people usually get a sense of which kind of animals you're meeting. So when I say you're meeting a snake, nobody's ever saying, oh, beautiful, I love snakes so much. I would love to have a pet as a snake. Nobody has said this. But if you say a lion, people say, okay, this is a very important animal with credibility, leadership, etc., etc. So basically, the idea is very simple, which is whatever organization you're going to choose to work, you're going to find a predictable set of behaviors based on people personality. Okay, and it's defined by, let's say, 2 elements. One is you're going to meet people that are working for themselves or working for the organization. So the team players, or the people that are the prima donnas, is only about them, okay? So that's one dimension. The second dimension is you're going to meet people that understand the culture of the organization, or the people that don't. They are to a certain extent very naive, maybe inadequate or unfit, but surely naive in understanding the game of the organization. So if you put a matrix with these 2 dimensions, you have 4 sets of behaviors, okay? One dimension is people that are, let's say, not really fit to understand the culture. They did understand it, and they're very selfish in their behavior. Now, so I call them the chickens, so the people that are very, or the parrots, so people rather, let's say, insignificant in their contribution to organization and very selfish. So you want to avoid to be that way. Then you have all the people that are really team players, are really working incredibly hard for organization, but to a certain extent still naive. So conduct of dogs, to me, in the most positive sense. Incidentally, I love dogs. So they're very loyal, but to a certain extent, inadequate or without having a general understanding of what's happening in the organization. Okay.
What happens to the dogs, Paolo?
Dogs usually remain dogs all their lives and get maybe when they're lucky some bones or some crumbles, but they never get the first dish.
Yeah.
So they're condemned to be in a, let's say, marginal role. They work incredibly hard and they don't understand why on earth somebody else get promoted while they're putting 70 hours per week.
Yeah.
So they're beautiful people to have in organizations because they work incredibly hard. They are the backbones of organization. These are the loyal soldiers that pay the safe pair of hands. But for some reason, they're missing the opportunities because they're to a certain extent isolated. So I'm encouraging dogs not to become snakes, but to become a little bit smarter, to say, hold on a second, what do you know about the organization? How does it work? People that, oh my God, I didn't know there was a this role, I didn't even apply. So they are so concentrated in their own turf, they forget to use the antennas, the radar. So I'm encouraging them to say, just work for the organization, absolutely, but also be mindful of what's happening in the organization in order to understand the opportunity and the risks. And usually dogs are the ones that are sacrificed, or the lambs, they're sacrificed when there is a crisis. Okay, so then you have the people that are, let's say, extremely astute, extremely smart. They know the culture of the organization, but they work for themselves. And so I put them the snakes because they're very dangerous. The people that are working for them, and then if you bring them to certain extent, I devoted 7 pages to describe the psychopaths in organization because there are many. And the last category, which we should aspire to become, is the people that are working for the organization. They are aware of what's happening. They become the lions, the elephant. So they have institutional memory, they have credibility, they have gravitas, and they are positive energy and knowledge in the organization. So everybody start as a dog, I think. You want to move from as a dog to an elephant, avoiding to become a snake, and if possible, try not to be a chicken.
Try not to be a chicken. Yes, indeed. Paolo, what happens if we join an organization led by foxes and snakes? Do we have any possibility to change them, or shall we just leave?
No, you cannot change a snake in something different. If you work with Adolf Hitler, he's not going to become a Gandhi or Mandela. So I'm saying this with realism. Don't try to change the individuals or the culture because it's really difficult. You have probably, in my view, a tactic and a strategy that you have to use. The tactic is how can you survive in a very toxic organization? Okay, and so if you read the book, you get some indication there. It's like going to Chernobyl. It's like you're going to a toxic place. You need to get protected. You need to have, or like the COVID-19, you have to wear gloves, mask. You have to wash your hands. You have to avoid the disease getting to you, because if it gets into you, you're going to get into trouble. But then the real question is, do you really want to be in this situation for the rest of your life? So to me, I'm suggesting people say, listen, you don't have to stand up and resign, but just wear some protective gears, but eventually move out. Because when you go to Chernobyl every day, or you get the toxic radiation, or you start to think the work in a toxic organization is normal. And this is pretty bad. So I work for two people that were despicable in their, let's say, behavior in their life. I suffered a lot, and this chapter is not based on just intellectual research. It's based on my own experience. So I'm suggesting people, I don't know if it's really worth spending time with this kind of organization, this kind of people.
When doing my research about you, I've also heard you saying that when a person joins a new organization, they should adapt to their boss's modalities rather than expecting the other way around to happen.
And of course, I mean, you need to understand the how these guys or this guy or this woman operates. No, so going back to the beginning of this conversation, working for a guy from Texas was smoking cigars and cursing all the time was very different than working with a son of a diplomat that was very spoiled, and he had his driver waiting for him and all the rest. So you need to a certain extent adapt to understand what is his style. Does he want to talk? Is a guy that you can interrupt, the personality. You need to do a bit of research in the way he or she operates the best, okay? So, for example, in my team, I used to say to people, listen, don't come to me before 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm not in a particularly good mood when it's early in the morning. And this is a moment where I study, when I reflect, and when I put the plan. So don't come to me. But, from 5 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock, by all means, you're most welcome. So people were kind of used to leave me alone to a certain extent in the morning and to put all the meetings in the afternoon. That to me was perfectly fine. But equally, I had to adapt to my own individuals. I had in my life 19 different bosses from 14 different nationalities, some of them older. I work with people that are political, who are extreme right or extreme left, people who are from different countries, people that have different sexual preferences. So you kind of people that have different lifestyle. People are coming early in the morning or late in the evening, whatever. So you need to dance a little bit with them, but you dance on the modalities. You don't dance on the values. That's to me is the point. The modality means, okay, you prefer to meet me, let's say 5 o'clock in the afternoon rather than 10, no problem. Okay, this to me is a no-brainer. But you ask me to do something that is unethical, questionable, stupid, well, then it's a different conversation. So the adaptation is on the modality, is not on the substance.
Yeah.
So if you understand this, I think is important, because I don't mind to adapt, and I ask people to adapt to my own style, because I manage, hundreds of people in my own life. But when managers ask you maybe to do something that is not particularly clean, well, that's a different game. So it's not about adaptation. It's about losing your soul, in which case it's not worth doing it.
Yes, and this leads to the very idea of integrity you write extensively about in the book. Not doing the things you may regret in future, from not taking bribes to refusing the company of a prostitute sent by a client in the middle of the night. There are many stories in the book.
Yeah, no, but here there are some amazing stories that I referred even in my book. But if you think there are some obvious things that people shouldn't even think about doing, which is corruption, taking bribes, and so on and so forth. No, and I have to say 98% of the people don't fall into this trap. Okay, It's just stupid. It's, to me, it's not even corruption; it's just stupidity. Okay, but it's something more difficult to get is, think about, I'm saying something that is politically inappropriate, but I said it. Think about, the Trump administration, okay? Well, maybe I'm not saying that these people are corrupted, all of them, but they don't stop the guy by doing something that is so obviously wrong, okay? Look at the way he's managed COVID-19 or the George Floyd killing, okay? So corruption is not necessarily not accepting a bribe or not drugs or prostitutes or whatever, which is obvious. Is to say, okay, where do you stand when you see that your boss or your organization doing something that is bluntly against what you stand for? Okay. So, for example, and I mentioned this in my own book, once I went to work for a company, and when I was offered the job, they asked me to develop people, hire many people, etc. And when I ended up working for this organization a few months later, the day first, they told me, you have to fire 11,000 people, an organization of 12,000 people. All right. Wow. So in exchange of which there is $1 million for you, plus $1 million salary. Wow. So I thought, okay, great. I'm in an organization where they asked me to fire 11,000 people in 5 months, in exchange of which I'm going to get $2 million. It's a lot of money. Sure. Never saw this morning. Okay. Well, I resigned the day after. Okay. And why? Because I wasn't getting a bribe. It was a bonus in exchange of a role. Okay. But then, first of all, was against my values. Second, the reputation that I would be built is I would have been the killer of that organization. And quite frankly, there is no price tag that justifies that. So screw it. I left, and the day after I resigned. It was difficult because at the time we just adopted our daughter. We bought an apartment. I have a big mortgage to pay, and so I have to confess I haven't slept well for a couple of months. But I don't regret taking that decision. So corruption is not like, oh, I didn't take a bribe, or that's easy, okay? Because if you do it, you're just an idiot. It's more difficult to remain true to yourself, which is the subtitle of my book, when you see something that is the opposite of what you believe in. And this is a difficult moment. I said in some of my speeches, I said, well, there isn't a template or form or a video that you can download with the solution. That's where you are naked in front of your evidence and the truth and your values. So what you do is actually defines the person you're going to become.
Absolutely. And speaking of integrity, you wrote the story of an incredible man named Lance McKay, which is not just a beautiful and inspiring story, but also quite a lesson in leadership. I'd love if you could share it with our audience today.
No, absolutely. Lance McKay is an amazingly crazy guy from Alaska that had won for 4 consecutive years a Yukon competition, which is a competition fundamentally you have to cross Alaska with the dogs. You say the kind of slitta, no, the dog.
Sled dogs, I think.
Sled dog.
Yeah.
And he's won for 4 consecutive years. So I met him a few years ago because I went on vacation to Alaska. It was in 2014, I remember. So I went to this bookstore in Anchorage and I met this guy. And, I was writing my book. I always love books, etc. So I ended up listening to his book presentation. And then at the end of the presentation, I grabbed a beer. I went to him with a beer and I said, listen, let's have a drink. I'd love to ask you a question. And say, how on earth can you do 1,200 miles in the middle of Alaska in winter, 50 degrees below zero? And at that time, the guy was under treatment for cancer in his throat. So he couldn't speak. The guy they have to speak with a machine.
A machine.
So he was really not in a good shape at all. I mean, to me, it's like the equivalent to committing suicide, And they said, no, it's to me, I wanted to prove it to myself that I could do it. And they said, how did you win? I said, oh, that's easy. I just eat after the dogs. I said, what do you mean? I have 14 dogs, and you win this race if you return with 4 dogs, which fundamentally means that you can kill 80% of the people that are working for you and still win. Yeah. The guy said, I always return with all my dogs, even the one that get injured. I don't let them die. I put them in the sleighs with me, so I bring them back. And when there is a moment of eating, twice per day, we stop for a couple of hours and I eat after the dogs. So the dogs realize 2 things. First of all, that I never let anybody of them behind. And secondly, that when I eat after them. And so that to me was a wonderful, wonderful experience of learning 2 essential traits of leadership. The first one, you don't let anybody behind. And the second one, when there is a prize, you're the last one to eat. Well, regrettably, I don't think that most of the be able to CEOs is this one. No, a lot of organizations are talking about restarting, the great restart, but maybe they made 20 or 50,000 people redundant 1 week earlier. So fundamentally, they let them die. Or maybe they pay themselves huge salaries in the moment where they have reduced the salary of the people making a couple of $1,000s per month, if they make a couple of $1,000s per month. So basically, they eat before the dogs. These people are not leaders. These people are in charge of an organization without being a leader. And perhaps people should reflect about the difference.
Yes, and the salary gap between a CEO and the least paid employee of a company should be quite an indicator of it, isn't it?
Yeah, because it used to be 1 to 20, 25 until recently, about 20 years ago. And now it goes up to 1 to 360. 1 to 360, it's very simple to understand. It means that on January 1st, the CEO has already made the money that the average employee makes in 1 year. Okay?
So, yeah.
It's very simple. I mean, you don't need to be a mathematician. I'm not. Well, fundamentally, what does it mean? This is something else that organizations should be doing, people should be doing by work organization. If you offer you a salary of, let's say, 30,000 euros per month, okay, and you see that the CEO is making 7 million, how does it make you feel? Okay? That doesn't mean the CEO should not be paid more. I believe they should be paid more. I mean, they have huge responsibilities, no? But there are limits of the decency of what is acceptable. And quite frankly, I think the current system has lost the sense of decency.
So what's a reasonable gap, in your opinion?
Well, listen, there are studies from the World Bank, etc., that basically 1 to 20, 1 to 30.
1 to 20.
So if the average salary of a person is $20,000, okay, you 20 or 30 times this amount, I think, within acceptability. When it starts to become 300 or 400, it's not. And this is important. No, there are people that are working from organizations with millions, and I don't want to pick up an organization in particular. There are some CEOs that are making huge packages, and the guys working for them are struggling to get to the end of the month. So, think about if we want to work in this kind of organization.
Yes. Nonetheless, the billionaires, the sharks, are quite celebrated in today's narrative.
Well, but that's my point, which is the point of my book, which is how do you define success? Because if you define success based on money, visibility, and power, you end up with these kind of models. Okay, so then it's, oh my God, Donald Trump on this respect has been a very successful person. Berlusconi has been a very successful person. Okay, Bolsonaro, which is another businessman, you may say is a very successful person. Why? They accumulated wealth, power, assets, properties, and all the rest. Okay, that's one model. If you use this model, you end up with this kind of, let's say, reference point. I believe we should use another model, which is not about this. It's about impact, is about helping others, it's about learning, it's about impact on communities, it's about improving, the place where you operate. And so it's much more achievable. So when you use this model, then, the hero is Donald Trump. When you use another model, you end up with a completely different story. And that's the one I suggested.
Yes, and the fact that you have worked with many top executives up to prime ministers gives you a lot of credibility in this regard. Especially when you write that the people at the top of an organization or of a company are not necessarily the happiest ones.
No, they're not, because they are horrified and terrorized and to lose this power. Okay? They really are, and because the board of directors can kick them out, or the next political action can keep them out. In my view, they're a different model, and I'm using another is politically, there is a political connotation about to say, but take about Obama or Trump. Obama got a degree at Harvard. He got a job offers to work in investment banking. Probably would have become relatively richer. Ended up working to help communities in Chicago. So I went into politics. He became president, as you know, and now he has a normal life. Of course, a very comfortable life because he's president of the United States and all the rest. But you see a consistency in his decisions, including the one made by his wife, to help communities, to work on something that is meaningful for the world, and even the word that it's used recently after the events in Minneapolis were words of reconciliation. No? So to me, this is an example of a leader that has actually used his power to do something that is positive. Giorgio Armani in Italy. Giorgio Armani now has done amazing things in the luxury industry. The guy is a billionaire, he's famous and all the rest, but you can still see some element of ethic and impact to communities, despite the fact that the guy is over 80 and probably can retire happily and enjoy life. Then you have a different model of still accumulating money and power, and who cares about the rest? I mean, the World Bank, I mentioned, worked for many years in the organization. 87% of the wealth that has been created on the planet the last 20 years went on the pocket of 3% of individuals. So that, to me, is a scandal.
Yeah.
So to me, the problem is not about increasing the GDP, it's the distribution of the GDP. So it's not about making cakes, it's how you actually share the cake. In addition to make the cake, of course, no? Otherwise there is no cakes. So to me, the debate about distribution, wealth distribution, equity and fairness is central to ethical behavior in organizations, in communities, and in countries. If this debate is missing, you end up with a limited number of amazingly rich people, like in Brazil, like in Russia, like in Mexico, like in the United States, and a huge amount of people struggling to get to the end of the month.
Yes. And I think that addressing wealth distribution also leads us to have a conversation about the impact of technology on the job market. I mean, many people today think that the increasing presence of automation, artificial intelligence, algorithms, virtual and augmented reality is going to create a jobless future for many people. What's your take on this, Paolo?
Now, here, there's a chapter in my book about the last one devoted to this, and I've been, may I say, specialized in this specific topic for quite some time now. I'm going to maybe just give you a number, and this number gives you a sense of what I'm trying to say, because the humanity has always been divided between two camps. The optimistic, they say, oh, technology will create great opportunities, and the pessimistic say they will destroy jobs. And both camps had reasons to feel this way because they have evidence that support both views. Okay, So people, organizations, they tend to shift on the optimistic or the pessimistic based on political ideas or the consideration. I have a different approach. My approach is the following. Now, it is true, absolutely true, that technology creates new jobs. It's also true that the set of skills that people offer are not the ones that are needed for the new jobs. Therefore, the problem is not creating new jobs, yes or no. The answer is yes. It's the fact that these new jobs require a set of skills that most of the people don't have. So the real problem is not do we have jobs, yes or no, because we do, is do we have the people with the skills needed to perform these jobs. And therefore, the real question, the real focus of policymakers, organizations, and countries to say, how can I put people in a condition to do these jobs? Because without that transition, they would not be able to perform. Before the crisis, before the COVID crisis, the United States had 9 million jobs available and 8 million jobs of people unemployed. These people unemployed were not able to fill these jobs.
Yeah.
This is interesting, no? Because, they don't. I mean, if you get somebody coming from Walmart and looking for a drone specialist, it's unlikely this guy's going to take the job. So there are some measures that we need to take in terms of providing some minimal level of assistance to this individual to deal with the emergency of the moment, but you need to have long plans on education, university, and schooling to bring population and people to do these jobs. Without this, you will have a dichotomy between what the job market is requiring and what the candidates are offering. And if there is a delta between the two, it's not going to work.
Paolo, to conclude our conversation, we cannot avoid talking about COVID-19. And recently, you have written an article for the Harvard Business Review with Professor Dave Ehrlich, which is titled Focus to Manage the Crisis, COVID-19 that is, in which you share a few principles to help us get through the crisis. I will list them. 1. Increase customization of products and services. 2. Manage the paradoxes. 3. Leverage uncertainty. And 4. Find a guide. Would you like to take us through them or just explain one of them?
Maybe one of them, which is important, which is managing the paradox, which I think is quite important now, because people think, we have a bit of a approach in which we say, we do or white or black, or we take care of the environment, or we increase the profits, or we take care of the people, or we run the organization. That's not the right approach. I mean, I think the new leaders has to manage the paradox. And so fundamentally, the paradox means managing ambiguity and managing things that appear to be contradicted, but they are not. Okay. Mm-hmm. One example is, of course, if you're CEO of an organization, you have the responsibility to have this organization profitable and sustainable. Okay. And you also need to take care of individuals. You need to take care of the health of these individuals, of these people. Okay. So the managing the paradox is the capacity to put in a cohesive framework, the capacity to do things that appear to be contradictory, but in reality they are not. And so one of the skills that the new leaders, I created an institute called Leadership 4.0, needs to have is the capacity to manage ambiguity and paradox in a way that makes sense, because both needs are relevant. You need to take care of the environment and to have an organization that is profitable. You need to take care of individuals and have a profitable organization. So you need to be able to find a good synthesis and a new merger between something that appear to contradict it. And so if you think about the capacity, is not only cognitively, but is also human to bring together things that appear to be different, but they have to be reconciled.
Yeah. Paolo, before I thank you for sharing so much value, is there a message you'd like to share, to send with our listeners who don't sleep at night worried about their careers?
This is a very good question, Carlo. Like many others before, I fully understand the concern that we all have on not so many levels. If you're a young student, you don't know if you're going to find a job. If you're a person my age, my mid-50s, probably concerned about looking for a job. I mean, I totally get this, not only with my mind, but with my heart. I'm encouraging people to know that, and I wrote that little story called The Treasure Inside You, that we all have something to offer to communities, to organizations. Your job is to find out what it is and to package in a way that is compelling to others, by using this and developing these three assets that I was referring to. So I encourage people not to discourage. We all have something beautiful that we can offer. You just have to be, to a certain extent, the marketing officer of yourself to understand how can I offer, what can I give to people, what are the features that I can bring. I give an example. I'm coaching somebody that's been a champion of poker, and the guy said, "Oh, I only play cards. I don't know what to offer to people. I've been playing cards and poker all my life." Well, not really, because the guy he knows how to do poker face. He knows how to manage anxiety. He knows how to negotiate. He knows how to manage, situation and negotiations where it's difficult. And so now the guy is moving from whatever job he was doing to a mediation kind of role in organizations. So I'm encouraging people to say, whatever you know, how the body of knowledge you develop in your life, the experience, the knowledge, can be transferable to other organizations and other let's say settings that could be relevant to somebody. And I believe that all of us can offer this to the world.
Absolutely. Paolo, where is the best place to find you online?
But LinkedIn is a good place. I have also my webpage, paologallo.net. And perhaps a good start could be there. And maybe I encourage people to read my book. And it's that I give the proceeds of my book to charity. So I never wrote my book for the sake of making money. I wrote my book for the sake of helping people. So, and even if you buy one, I will get 30 cents after 2 years. So if you buy a book, don't worry, I never become rich because of that reason.
Paolo Gallo, grazie mille for being on the show.